Touch and Beyond session. I'm session chair Xiaojun Bi from Google. So in this session, we will have 4 very interesting papers. The first one is FaceTouch, enabling touch interactions in display fixed UIs for mobile virtual reality. The presenter will be Jan Gugenheimer from Ulm University.
Hello? Oh, yes, it works? People can hear me? Beautiful. Thanks for a nice introduction. My name is Jan Gugenheimer. I'm from University, and I'm going to present the work FaceTouch today with my colleagues from Ulm University and Daimler Prothix. I'm going to jump right into showing you the prototype. And basically what we did is we tried to leverage the backside of an HMD as a touch input device for mobile VR. The motivation for our work. So this year, well, it's quite a big year in terms of consumer VR. A lot of products are released. HTC Vive released theirs. PlayStation VR released their devices. And it's going to be an exciting time. The VR concepts are like the devices that we are focusing on that we think are the mobile ones. So things like the Google Cardboard or the Samsung Gear VR. And I think they're generally expected to penetrate the consumer market a little bit more since they're basically a smartphone with a pair of lenses and a little bit of, well, cardboard around. And they create interesting scenarios or application scenarios where you can now literally access VR everywhere you are. But even these devices, how wonderful the Google Daydream device is, they're still like not at this point where we think this is going to be how mobile VR is going to look like. And this is a little GIF of Fidget VR. It's a Kickstarter. It's not my Kickstarter. I just think it's a really beautiful concept where VR, the lenses are already embedded as part of the smartphone. And this enables now quite interesting or, well, exciting application scenarios where we can now literally access VR everywhere we are, everywhere we want, and have things like, for instance, my girlfriend, when she's somewhere, could send me a 360-degree selfie, and I could be in the subway, just look around and see it and enjoy it. And the questions that come up is, how can we interact now in this highly mobile environment? Because we don't have any instrumentation, we don't have anything around here. We need to have a certain ways to interact with this. And as well, nomadic scenario, of course, is something where, as defined by Kleinrock, something where I just change my locations. If at home, I just change to the couch or change to somewhere. Again, I am in an environment which is not instrumented. How can I interact here? And some approaches that are currently used and are presented, for instance, in Gear VR are leveraging a touchpad, which is on the side of the HMD, which works particularly well, quite well in some scenarios, and we're going to later on compare against these with our device. And additional ones where you just use additional accessories. You have a controller with you, or the Daydream comes now with this wonderful little gyro and touchpad controller. But the downside is you have to carry them with you, you have to bring them along. And if you think about the vision that I showed you, that this is going to be part of the smartphone device, you don't necessarily want to carry something with you. And another alternative, and this is interesting as well, this is beautiful, is hand tracking in general. And hand tracking as a technology, well, increases your presence, and this is beautiful for applications where you want this immersion, where you want to be part of the scene. But for the application scenarios that we were looking more on utilitarian interaction. So simple, quick interactions where you select where you select buttons, where you interact with certain UIs that you have in front of you. And there are two, downside I would say to hand tracking is, the one is that in this public scenarios that I showed, you reach out, you reach into something that you, not really know what's going to be there. You can, touch things or people that are in your surrounding. And you have one downside is, and they're going to talk in a related work a little bit about it, is the concept of touching the void. So the second where you touch nothing, you don't have any passive haptic feedback, no resistance, you will, it will decrease your performance of interaction. So our goal was how can we create a device, or how can we create an interaction that is going to be all in one device itself, and will allow us to interact with display fixed UIs in these mobile settings that we have. And you're always going to see us using the DK2 here just for the sake of simplicity of development. This is envisioned to be on a mobile HMD. I'm going to go quickly over the prior art due to time's sake. Please look to the paper for a more detailed discussion of the whole prior work. And one direction of work that we were highly inspired and took a lot of inspiration and methods from was back-of-device interaction concepts, which are already presented at WIST 06 by Winkler et al., where they're presented in concept how can we interact under the table and how good are people to interact with UIs that are, or targets that are not particularly visible for them maybe. And later on, Winkler at 07 showed lucid touch, where they explored the design space of how can we interact with the back of a device, what is possible now, and how does it help us with problems like occlusion. And at Chi 06, Baudish already started in quantitative evaluation. How good do people perform with these back of device interaction? How good can we touch them? How does this work? And what are, insights about this? At Chi 12 was an interesting work called Wolf et al., where they showed that for certain back-of-device interactions, it's not necessary, or it would not particularly be always necessary to have a certain visual feedback due to the sense of proprioception. We are capable of interacting with back-of-device to a certain amount as well. And Serrano et al. Had an interesting concept again, where they showed how can we leverage this facial area that we have for interaction with head-mounted displays. Can we use our cheeks or something around the face as an input device? And basically this works leverages the sense of proprioception we have. So we have quite a rich sense of proprioception in our facial area. We can blindly find our eyes, our nose, our ears. So we have quite a good mapping of this region. And I only have one of the VR works in our paper. Please look for the more detailed discussion of virtual reality interaction concepts. And I pointed out to the work of Lindemann, where they showed this downside of touching the void, where they used a paddle as a passive haptic feedback to interact with UIs, and showed significance improve against having nothing that you touch into nothing. And these are all concepts that we try to leverage in our implementation as well, or build upon. So to the concept again. So FaceTouch is, we attach a touch display on the backside of an HMD, and we attached it on 5 buttons. So this display is hanging on 5 buttons attached to the VR HMD, and I'm going to show you why we need the 5 buttons in just 2 slides. The focus that we had, as I said, was utilitarian interaction, which is oftentimes implemented with something like HUDs, you can imagine. So it's a display fixed UI. No matter where I look, the UI is going to stand on top of me. It's going to follow me. And our concept also has this virtual plane, and on this virtual plane we place certain UI elements that we want the people to interact with. In contrary, a lot of mobile VR is currently implemented with world-fixed UIs, where everything that I want to interact with is part of the virtual world, and I have to orientate myself towards it and click and select it. So after we presented, or we built this prototype, we were thinking, how can we create now interaction concepts? How can we let people select something in VR? And again, here we built upon the work of backup device interaction. So certain of these things, or even the names partially, are motivated by them. And the land-on technique, as you see here, is literally how we use a smartphone. You touch something, you blindly, we don't visualize the hand here. You touch one of the areas, and that is what you select. The second way of interacting, we had liftoff. A liftoff is you still can correct your selection. So you touch the screen, you can correct on a movement, and the second way you release your hand from the screen is when you select the target beneath, or the target that you wanted. And the press-on is the poor man's version of the force touch of Apple, where this is what we use the 5 buttons on. So we have a touch screen, you can touch a screen, you can put your finger on the screen, and the second way you press in on the touchscreen itself, you make a selection. So we were interesting how now we ran several user studies, and I'm going to talk over some of the findings there. For more detailed views, again, please refer to the paper. So the research question initially we had is how accurate and fast can people actually interact with this now in this context, and depending on the size of the targets, and especially with a land-on condition where you don't have any visual feedback, how good is this going to work? So we ran a within-subject study design with 18 participants, and we had 3 variables, independent variables. So we had with 3 levels, 2 levels, and 2 levels. So the one independent variable was the commit method, the 3 that I presented to you. The second one was the plane distance. So I showed you the virtual plane that we have. And we're curious how much of the field of view does it have to, or is it going to make a difference or an impact on the performance if we just change the proportional of the field of view that it occupies here. We called it for several distances. So we had 3 distances, how far the plane is going to be away. And keep in mind that by changing the plane distance, we did not change the actual physical target size. This was another variable that we had. So we had the target sizes of the targets that we wanted to select, and these are the diameters that we used for 2 sizes of the target. And the study procedure was a Fitts law test that we did, a Fitts law task, where we let people start with a start button and then select a target that was randomly spawned in one of these 12 locations. 12 locations that we had. And we had it within subject conditions, so they were sitting there for a little bit more than an hour selecting a lot of targets. And I'm going to start with the error rate. And you can see already the orange is the land-on condition that we had with error rate. So there was quite a significant difference in terms of error rate for the targets itself. And in the press-on condition was an interesting finding that we had. It was quite uncomfortable for people to have physically pressed the buttons that we had. So it was maybe also a problem for our implementation because the buttons were way too rigid. An interesting finding I want to highlight here is that the plane distance itself made a significant difference. And again, we did not, so here, just by having an interaction with the near plane compared to the mid-plane, the mid-plane led to significantly less errors. So this was a significant impact here, even though the physical target sizes on the touchpads were not altered. They were still the same in both conditions here. But again, this is something that was shown by prior work, that the visual representation of a target is something of relevance when you want to have a selection or make a selection. We further dig deeper and wanted to know, and this is for land-on now, we wanted to know how do people, particularly how did the touches distribute over the touchscreen that we have. And these are the targets that we had, the 12 targets. With the green little highlighted circle is the small target size. The bigger one is the large target size that we have. And this is for the mid-distance plane of all the participants. And what we found is that after a certain distance, so we cannot talk about the particular location since we had the start button in the center, but we can talk about a certain distance that was taken. So the further you go away from the from the button, the more the people, or significantly more, they had an undershooting, and the closer they were to the starting position, they had an overshooting. And further studies must be conducted to more deeply understand this concept. And we further on calculated an ideal or a target size that would end up with 95% success rate, and it would be approximately in this size, so double our big target. So when we design UIs or buttons in this size, you will probably end up with a 95% success rate. We then went on and conducted the second user study where we focused on the impact of the actual positioning of the touchpad. And we compared here against the baseline. There was the side that we saw, which is often used with Gear VR or Google, the Google Glass. And we ran the same user study. We had, again, a within-subject design with the Fitts law task. And the main condition we were looking into was actually positioning. So is there difference compared where I put the touchpads? And I'm going to focus here on this difference that we had. We found a significant difference in terms of success rate. So this is, again, for the land-on, between the face area and the hand area. And this was something that surprised us initially as well, and a significant difference between face and side conditions. And these are error rates, and you would say they are still quite high, and they are indeed quite high, but we did not use the perfectly calculated targets that we did before. We used the same large targets as we had in the first user study, so you can still optimize there. We wanted here just to see or find, is there any difference in this, in the performance selection. And again, we looked deeper into the whole selection process and the distribution of the touch points. And in terms of scatter, we calculated the scatter, how much is are the targets scattered around these actual selection point that we wanted. And there was a significant difference between face and hand. So you can see when I switched these, there was a significant higher scatter and compared to the side condition. So people had more, a higher scatter of the selections. We then went on and implemented several applications to kind of explore the design space. What are we capable of doing now with this interaction? And the main concept always goes around, we have this virtual plane in front of us where we can position certain UI targets that we can use for interaction. It was a multi-touch concept that we had. And we implemented, for instance, something like text entry. And this text entry uses now the lift-off selection condition that we have. And using the lift-off, the people were, and this was an informal study we run with some of our colleagues, they were capable of selecting or inputting text around 10 words per minute, approximately. Then we wanted to see further, and this is only scratching the surface here. We wanted to see how can we use something like gestures or multi-touch gestures to create something like 3D modeling. And this is my colleague sitting here modeling a UIST logo or part of the UIST logo. And you can see he can call a menu. The second way he swipes with 3 fingers. He can select certain, axes he wants to manipulate and make a certain 3D implementation or simple 3D modeling. And of course, because we love games, we implemented a little zombie shooter. And this uses the random condition here. So here the targets are optimized for the sizes that we calculated are good. And people are capable of interacting here with the device. And of course, we used an application where a misclick is not that crucial. So if he clicks a little bit on the side, it's not going to destroy the experience. And this looks a little bit weird, a little bit funny, I would say. Indeed, we have a big device where we attach a touchscreen. But if I go back to the vision, the initial that we had, if this is going to be the VR that we're going to use in our daily lives, and here holding this in my hand and using this backside for interaction, we think it could be an application that is going to be relevant at one point. So in conclusion, the contributions we had were we presented a concept of FaceTouch to interact in mobile scenarios with display fixed UIs. We ran 2 studies showing the feasibility and the inherent abilities of how people interact with FaceTouch, and compared to 3 different mounting locations, how good they are, and explored a little bit the design space with several example applications we implemented. I think I'm good in time. Thanks a lot.
So any questions? Please raise your hand. I think one volunteer will bring microphone to.
Yeah, I see.
Hi, Roll Vertigal. I was wondering, it looks from.
I can hear you.
All right. So on the location, it seems like the displays are different size. Or
yes, the side.
So did you correct for that?
So the hand and the face, they're exactly the same. We can remove the one from the hand.
So it's just the side that was smaller.
The side was smaller. Yes, the side was.
Do you think that had something to do with the results?
It might. This is a valid point. It might have one influence on the performance. Nevertheless, we try to optimize it for the size. How big could we position it on the side there? But I think the bigger problem in general that we have, or people will have with the side condition when you make direct selection, is you have to remap the orientation. So when you see something in front of you, is this front or is that front? So this initial part, I think this was the bigger impact on the negative performance. But this is again speculation. This.
Okay, thank you.
There's on mine, isn't it? Yeah. Oh, sorry. Who is?
Hello. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, Nikhil Sharma from Google. Besides your quantitative measures, did you have any qualitative findings? Were people's arms tired, for example, holding their hands like
that? Yeah, this is a really valid point. So the envision scenario that we had was short bursts of interaction. Something like one of your Google fellows said, snack bite VR, where you just put it in and you have certain interaction. So in this short bursts, it's going to be as tiring as having a side on the side. If you actually think about hand tracking, it's less tiring since you are not stretching your arms around and you don't have this negative thing of this passive or lack of passive haptic feedback. But over a longer period of time, and we had a longer period of time in our study conditions, what people came up with, and it was interesting, is they already took resting positions. So exactly as you did, they had this and did the interaction. They leaned back a little bit. So they're already optimized for this, as we do in daily lives when we sit, or it's kind of tiring having the hands up. Yeah. Yeah.
Yongquan Kim from KAIST. Nice talk.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there any possible difficulty according to some mental rotations, like because we normally touch things and operate things in the opposite ways?
Yeah, this is a good point. And there I would quote Patrick Bodish that had a talk where he already used the back of the device. This mirroring interaction is something that we do as well, kind of in a daily life. So we look in the mirror and we shape ourselves. Then we have already this mental rotation in there. So we're a little bit familiar with this form of interaction. But what we had, again, we had a training phase in the beginning of our study. So people were like got acquainted with the interaction where they touched a little bit and they were like, okay, that's how it works and that's fine. And yeah, but there was not a big part. In this facial area, yes. On the side, this was a bigger part. Because on the side, you don't have this natural mapping that you would assume you have. This, what is front if you have a touchpad on the side? Is this front or is that front? Does this answer your question?
But in particular, with text entry, it might be more difficult.
Oh, yeah. We played around with certain orientations. How can we put the letters? We ended up with a standard QWERTY, and the layout of the text or the keyboard that we have, and I can show you this, was actually, well, exactly the one that you have. But this part of it, of course, this was new, and people were playing around, but get quite quick familiar with it. We have a demo here at UIST, which is not in the program, but it's going to be at Gyro VR, the demo, so you can drop by and play around with it. You're more than welcome.
Okay.
Let's thank Jan again.